Animated biblical film David has already exceeded $14 million in pre-sale tickets. The Chosen, a popular drama about Jesus, has grossed over $116 million domestically since Fathom Entertainment began releasing it theatrically in 2023. Studios are recognizing the box office potential of faith-based content. Pre-sale tickets. The Chosen, a popular drama about Jesus, has grossed over $116 million domestically since Fathom Entertainment began releasing it theatrically in 2023. Studios are recognizing the box office potential of faith-based content.
All right, it looks like we can rock and roll. Good morning. You are listening to Breaking Health Barriers with me, Dr. Jack Stockwell, this Wednesday morning. The 7th day of January 2026. Several things I want to talk about the vaccine schedule being trimmed back, but then I want to get into easy things to do for flu avoidance, since some people are still thinking somehow getting the flu shot will help them. Actually, the flu shot has very, very little evidence whatsoever of ever helping anybody. Countless studies. Flu rate, period of suffering from the flu, recovery from the flu, is the same whether you got the shot or not. The only problem with getting the shot, of course, is the immunosuppression that takes place, which usually leads to getting the flu. So hopefully I'll have some time to talk about, well, my plan is to talk about that. But I want to talk about the vaccine schedule because what's happened is very interesting in that what they are doing is very similar to what Denmark is doing. And the vaccine zealots, like Dr. Peter Hotez and Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, Senator Patty Murray have gone bananas over the recent announcement that the CDC, that the U.S. vaccine schedule is going to be trimmed back to look an awful lot like Denmark. And all children will still have access to all the vaccines they want. However, for some diseases, the doctors and the parents are going to decide on, depending on the risk and theoretical benefits of certain shots. Critics are saying that the diseases of the 20th century are going to come roaring back, and that Trump administration are going to be killing children because of this. Well, can that be right? Are children dying in large numbers in Denmark? Denmark maintains very high control over vaccine preventable diseases, despite having one of the most streamlined childhood vaccination schedules among all the higher income nations. The Danish program vaccinates children against about 10 to 11 diseases, fewer than the 16 to 18 historically targeted by the U.S. schedule. So the core Danish vaccines that they still offer vaccines for: measles, mumps, rubella, polio, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, Haemophilus influenza type B, pneumococcal disease, and HPV. The system now in Denmark omits universal vaccination for RSV, influenza, rotavirus, hepatitis A and B, varicella, which is, of course, chickenpox, and meningococcal disease. What's the difference? Well, Denmark has universal health care, like all the other high-income nations outside of the United States. They have a national health registry They have a very high compliance rate, which enables rapid outbreak detection and treatment. Denmark really isn't that big of a country, so if something breaks out, they want to know about it, and they want to know about it fast. And the smaller homogeneous population, which is somewhere around 6 million, and the robust social infrastructure that they have there, further reduces transmission. So hospitalization for diseases like rotavirus and varicella are managed through accessible care, effective treatment. This strategy leads to lower rates of most infectious diseases compared to the United States. And the Danish model demonstrates that under conditions of trust, transparency, better treatment for both vaccinated and unvaccinated children, that a more streamlined schedule can be a part of a more effective public health strategy. And so this recent move that has taken place in the CDC, while it may be earth-shaking to those in this country who are propagandized into believing the only way to prevent disease is with a shot, and now it's been cut back tremendously, cutting approximately 55 routine doses from age 6 months to 18 years old. So just the other day, the CDC formally adopted a revised childhood and adolescent immunization schedule following a presidential memorandum directing alignment with international best practices. Now, this marks the largest rollback of routine child vaccination in U.S. history. And after reviewing the peer country schedules and the scientific evidence that underlies them, federal health leadership has acknowledged that we are finally admitting it, that we are hyper-vaccinating our children. This results in a dramatically smaller routine childhood vaccine schedule, as I said, cutting approximately 55 routine doses. This is a major victory, even as serious safety concerns remain for the vaccines that continue to be recommended. This is a great step forward. I can only hope that there's going to be more. This was something that Trump indicated in his campaign, along with Bobby Kennedy Jr., that they were going to be addressing. Now, as critical as I have been lately of President Trump's imperial powers, reminding me of Augustus Caesar, he has done some things I'm very happy about, not the least of which is closing down the border and several other things I'm not going to take time to get into right now, but also what's happened through Health and Human Services. And so this is really monumental, because prior to this change, the number of vaccine doses recommended by the CDC from birth, 6 months, up to 18, were anywhere from 84 to 88 routine vaccine doses. Now, you'd wonder if these things worked, why do they have to keep booster after booster after booster? But aside from that, the previous vaccine schedule was targeting 17 different diseases, and 18 if the RSV monoclonal antibody is included. The new schedule has cut, as I said, 55 doses, targeting 10 to 11 diseases based on international consensus, and the net change of approximately 54 to 58 routine doses removed, some commonly summarized as 15. But importantly, this reduction applies only to vaccines previously labeled routine for all children. No vaccines were banned, and no vaccines were removed from availability. In other words, if you still want to give your children 55 more or up to 88 vaccines by the time they're 18 years old, and you believe in vaccine theory, you can still do so. So what was removed? What is no longer recommended for all children by default? Well, COVID-19. Thank goodness. influenza, the flu vaccine, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and usually hepatitis A and hepatitis B, which of course is the very first shot that most newborn infants on the day of delivery in the hospital get. But both hepatitis A, hepatitis B shots are removed from mandatory. The rotavirus, and I've talked about rotavirus several times in the past, where just keeping your child warm, give them chicken soup, love them, hold them, pet them, comfort them. They'll get over it in a matter of a day or two. And then meningococcal ACWI and meningococcal B. These vaccines account for nearly the 55 dose reduction. So what remains is routine. Well, the MMR. And I know how you feel about the MMR. I feel the same way about the MMR. The evidence against it is staggering. But that's still part of the routine childhood vaccination schedule. Diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, polio, Haemophilus influenza type B, it's known as Hib, the pneumococcal one, and varicella, which is chickenpox, and human papillomavirus reduced from 2 doses down to 1. And I have talked about the HPV vaccine in the past, and it was always the second one that was the knockout. I remember taking care of a young lady that just 13 years old. Her parents thought that they should get it. You know, it's for cervical cancer, to prevent cervical cancer. And which is usually spread by sexual contact. And 13 years old, she wasn't all that sexually active, but the parents, and I'm being facetious when I say that, of course, they're concerned about the future. And it put a hole in her brain. And in the past, when I've done a show on this, I had a picture up on the website of the MRI of her brain, and a hole about the size of a golf ball, which seriously affected her motor control, her sensory control, her ability to communicate. She made steady progress thereafter. Her mother brought her to us so that we could take care of her structurally and nutritionally. The last time I saw her, she was walking on her own. But this is still not safe by default, because these vaccines, the ones I just mentioned, still remain, especially the MMR. And all of these remaining vaccines that are part of the standard schedule now, insufficient studies for long-term outcomes. We just don't have them. They are completely untested in placebo-controlled trials. They've never been evaluated as a cumulative schedule. In other words, you think about one vaccine like MMR, but usually if you're in the pediatrician's office and you're following the vaccine schedule that the pediatrician requires you to do, or they'll remove you from their patient schedule, what happens when you're getting several of these? There's no studies. And we know that there are some studies that show that these vaccines can induce over 20 chronic diseases. And there are plenty of adverse events, such as febrile seizures, severe neurological injury, including autism, ADHD, tics, autoimmune disease, asthma, allergies, skin and gut disorders, ear infections, and a long list of other chronic diseases which have been documented across multiple vaccines. In the International Journal of Vaccine Theory, Practice, and Research, that was published September 9th, 2025, there was a peer review of the vaccinated versus unvaccinated study that was done, and how interested was Congress in it? Well, it all depends on, again, what has been suggested long before I got involved in the politics of medicine. The clothing that our elected House representatives and Senate, they should be wearing the logos on their coats of the companies that give them money. And the more money, the bigger the logo, just like you see with NASCAR drivers and Formula racers. And you see these big decals for Mobil Oil or some kind of brake or Goodyear tires or whatever else, which is what they're paid to do. Their sponsorship money that makes it possible for them to race, of course, includes displaying these decals. Professional golfers, usually with the t-shirts they wear, the golfer shirt, or with a hat that they're wearing, will usually display one of the primary sources of their sponsorship. Boy, I would love to see that on the clothing of our elected officials, even here in the state. As I have pointed out in the past, and it did not originate with me by any means, the last election that Orrin Hatch had, was it Mike Lee that was running against him? I can't remember. But Hatch won, of course. And the opponent was pointing out that the top 10 campaign contributors to Orrin Hatch do not do $1 worth of business inside the state of Utah. Now, is there anything wrong with that? Well, you kind of got to judge that for yourself. But the fact remains that he was bought and sold by multiple corporations to give him the money to run for re-election, which is the same for all of our elected officials. So how in the world did this vaccine schedule get cut back with the power of the most powerful lobby in Congress? It's not energy. It's not military-industrial complex. It's big pharma. The hospital pharma, hospital implement, medical equipment lobby is the biggest lobby in Congress. And these guys who make the laws should be, you can go find, I mean, the information's public. You can go find it out. You can go, online and go to the individual offices and see who gives them money. How accurate and how truthful it is anybody's guess. But I still think they should be wearing, when you see some news person walking down the hallways of the Senate office building or the Senate or the Congress Capitol building itself, and they're trying to pin down a particular representative or senator asking questions, and there's cameras and everything else, they should be wearing a uniform right then and there like a NASCAR driver that has the logos of all their contributors, their donors, because we know that's who they play to. We know that, don't we? It's just like Trump. Trump is playing to his donors, which is why, well, I'll save that for Monday. So, how did this get through? Because Bobby Kennedy Jr. has the authority as the Secretary of Health and Human Services over the FDA, the NIC, or the NIH, the CDC, and also the vaccine committees. And they just had a huge shakeup in the 17-member vaccine committee, the vaccine advisory committee, because almost all 17 were doing business or had done business with Big Pharma, the absolute fox in the henhouse kind of thing. So they said, thank you, but no thank you, you can go home now. And they were replaced by people who do not have a conflict of interest, but are still science research-oriented people who said, yeah, there's some problems here. There's some problems with this vaccine schedule. And it was what I mentioned here a moment ago. There aren't any long-term outcome studies. What's long-term? 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. If you had a cohort of children pre-puberty 30 years ago compared to a cohort of unvaccinated, and we watch them over 30 years. We watch what happens to them physically, cardiovascular system, nervous system, reproductive system, digestive systems, their skin, all the various systems of the body. Let's compare them after 30 years. Those studies simply do not exist. And why? And I know several of you could answer that question accurately and authoritatively, because I've discussed it on the show before, because it's considered unethical. It's considered unethical to say you've got 5 kids here on the one hand being vaccinated with following the recommended schedule, and then you got 5 kids over here who didn't get the vaccine, and then we watched them over the next 30 years. It's considered unethical to not give those 5 kids a vaccine, so it can't get past the IRB, and you end up not being able to do the study at all. Well, of course they don't want that study done. Then they're untested in placebo-controlled trials. You don't have to do a 30-year placebo-controlled trial. You could do one for 6 months, maybe 12 months. But again, to give a child a placebo where another child is getting the vaccine is unethical, so they say. And then they never evaluated these vaccines as a cumulative schedule. And these studies can be done, they just haven't done them, and they don't seem to want to do them, where you have a group of children who are following the regular schedule, and you are checking them at each point along the way to do an overall systems evaluation of their bodies, especially their immune responses and their neurological responses and their muscular responses and cardiovascular and several other things. Now that the COVID-19 vaccine has been implicated in serious cardiomyopathies, that wouldn't be a bad thing to check out. But the COVID-19 was taken out of the current childhood vaccine schedule. So the adverse reactions that have been reported at the CDC and through other sources, just terrible. Autoimmune diseases, asthma, allergies, skin and gut disorders, and a long list of other chronic diseases have been documented when multiple vaccines are given. So where is this going to go? I mean, why is this a massive win? Well, for decades, the childhood vaccine schedule expanded without schedule-level safety trials. The schedule expanded and expanded without long-term outcome data. They expanded without meaningful public debate. And they expanded without informed consent. Informed consent in the sense that if you decide you need to have your child vaccinated and you take them to one of the drugstores or the pharmacies and some grocery stores, or you even go all the way out to a pediatrician, do they tell you up front the risks? Sometimes they'll give you a sheet of paper to sign. Well, they usually do, because they don't want any liability for what's going to happen to that child if they have an adverse reaction. But what does informed consent involve? Well, consent is the big word, and so is informed. And for you to consent to have this done, whether you're having a dangerous operation on your brain yourself, or you're going to have your 6-year-old child get another dose of MMR, you want to know the serious side effects that are possible, the side effects that have been reported with the CDC and the FDA and the American Pediatric Association and whatever groups that are out there, especially with peer-reviewed journals that talk about this kind of stuff, should be made known to you. But a lot of these facilities don't want you to know this stuff because they don't want you to change your mind once you look at the facts. because they're in the business to make money, just as a pediatrician is. So this decision reverses that trajectory towards these kinds of problems because it just shrinks the routine exposure dramatically. And it brings back into play parental agency. So instead of a parent just, well, I don't really know, but my sister said if I don't get my children vaccinated like she did hers, then she doesn't want the children to come over to her house. That kind of idiocy, that kind of ignorance abounds in this country because people have to be right. Why do people have to be right? Because their value is based on how they perceive themselves in the sense of rightness and some authoritarian figure in the face of other people, like the older brother, the older sister. So most importantly, what's going on is it breaks the false premise that more vaccines are always better. So what's happened is the CDC has eliminated every non-consensus vaccine from the routine schedule, cutting routine exposure by approximately 55 doses. And an implicit admission that the safety of the expanded schedule was never adequately established. That's the thing that I want you to know here. Good morning, Wendell. That's the thing I want you to understand. What does this mean? What are they not saying by cutting 55 scheduled doses? Does it mean you don't need them? Does it mean that they're not effective? Does it mean that they might be dangerous? If any of those three ideas are true, what about the remaining schedule? But the overall underarching dynamic here is, it is an admission by the CDC that the safety of the bigger schedule is in question. Now, this decision doesn't end the problem. The vaccines that remain routinely recommended are still largely untested in the long term. No placebo-controlled trials. These things are administered during critical periods of nervous system development in a child. The brain and the wiring of the brain through the nervous system to the body for information, command signals from the brain to the body, sensory input, back sent to the brain. That was called afferent and efferent. Afferent neurotransmissions are information from the body to the brain. Efferent are commands from the body from the brain to the body. These things are not absolutely. They're not finished. The body isn't finished wiring until about 8 years old. And because there are neurodevelopmental problems with injecting these dangerous chemicals into the system, the question still remains with the existing schedule. There are no placebo-controlled trials. These shots are being administered while their nervous system is still developing, and it continues to pose serious concerns. As a result, there is a substantial number of autism cases and other chronic conditions that simply will continue to occur. I'm sure there's some people out there that were sitting on the fence, not sure whether they should vaccinate their child or not really given to research on the subject. But now that it's been cut in half practically, more than in half, okay, it's probably okay to go ahead and get them vaccinated now because the CDC cut out more than half of the recommended schedule. Now, by sharply reducing the cumulative exposure during early childhood, this change really marks the first credible step to reversing this whole trajectory. Because the burden of neurodevelopmental injury in the children of our country should begin to decline, not disappear. There's still going to be neurodevelopmental injuries to these kids that get the remaining schedule, but maybe diminish it somewhat. And even with its limitations, this action represents the most consequential course correction in U.S. pediatric vaccination policy in modern history. And it breaks the assumption that the ever-expanding schedule is inherently safe, because the latest one before this change was up to 88 shots. What's stopping it from being 100 shots over the next year or two? And it restores proportionality, and it opens the door to some long overdue accountability, transparency, and some real safety signs. So I am happily encouraged by this. I think this is great news. Now, we'll see if there are lower rates of neurodevelopmental diseases. That's the one I'm the most concerned with, because a newborn baby has a heart that's beating sufficiently to keep its body alive. The heart of a newborn has to go through a few changes. The PVO, the patent ovale, the little hole that's in the heart that allows the heart to beat and pump blood, pump the oxygen it's getting from its mother, bypassing the lungs because the lungs aren't breathing. After birth, that hole's still there, but through hormonal release, that hole starts to fill in. Patent foramen ovale, PFO, I think is what it is. And, but within a few months to a year or so, you have a great, well-functioning heart. From the moment of birth, the baby's first suckling at mama's nipple to get that colostrum for the next 3 days shows the baby's ability to eat, swallow, and digest is operating at birth, so that it can get its food and sustenance within minutes of being born. And within hours, it's going to produce its first bowel movement. And within moments of birth, it's going to urinate because it's been drinking amniotic fluid. And it's going to need to pee. All these things operating right there at birth. What isn't operating completely at birth? Well, its muscular system. It can sit there and wiggle and shake a little bit, but it's got a lot of muscle development to do. But what drives the muscles? The nervous system. Muscles don't contract, for the most part, unless it gets a command from the motor strip in the brain for the muscle to contract. And the movement of the baby inside mama before it's born demonstrates the nervous system is beginning to operate. But after baby's born and after a few weeks, to where it can begin to hold up its head, you notice it wobbling and bobbing like a bobblehead, because coordination is still developing. Nervous coordination, muscular coordination is still developing, even though all those other systems that keep the baby alive are functioning just fine. Well oxygenated blood getting to the brain, food digestion, making the necessary protein, fat, carbohydrate mixture to the cells of the body present. But the nervous system is still developing. And the best pediatric neurologists have told us, and it's in the textbooks, it's in the literature, it takes about 8 years before the nervous system is fully wired. The top bone in the neck, the bone that I focus on in my practice, called the atlas, the C1 vertebra, isn't fully bone until the child's about 6 years old. When they're born, it's just gristle. And there are things in the development of bone called ossification points. Points in that bone where it begins to harden, where the cartilage begins to become bone. That's not exactly true. It's where the early formation of that bone, not necessarily cartilage, the formation of that bone to become fully hard bone takes 6 years for that to happen. And in the atlas, there's 6 points in the atlas that the bone grows out from. You know that in the growing bone of a child, it grows from the growth plates, the ends of the bone. You look at the bone in your arm, your upper arm there, not the forearm, but the arm, where the humerus is. As the humerus begins to grow in a child, it doesn't grow throughout the length of the bone. It grows at only 2 points, at the end plates, at the ends of the bone, and it grows out from there. The ability of the body to metabolize the food that it eats, a child, to get the necessary nutrition that's necessary, there you go, for good, adequate bone density, for strong muscle tissue, and for good organ development, requires a coordination of several different systems, not the least of which is the nervous system. Now, I said all of that to say this. The one system in the body that is most susceptible to toxic chemical poisoning, which vaccines are, is the nervous system, especially in the developmental stages. Just something to think about. This is one of the reasons why the Japanese outlaw vaccinations prior to 3 years of age. I always said 2 years, but somebody told me the other day it was 3. You cannot vaccinate a child in Japan according to their vaccine schedule prior to 3 years. Why? Because of the development of the organs, primarily the brain and the nervous system. And you don't need to have these terrible chemicals injected into these babies' bodies while the brain is still trying to develop itself. All right. Now, there's one other thing that Bobby Kennedy Jr. did that I want to mention, is what this Obama-appointed judge did to his dye-free foods. Some of you might be aware of this. First, I want to mention we were able to schedule several more people yesterday for the K-Talk special, half off. There was so much demand for it during the month of December that a lot of people, because we required the schedule by the end of the month, for some time in January, those spaces all got filled up. And there are people calling in as recently as yesterday. Can we still take advantage of that? Well, as long as there's a demand for it, I'll continue to do it. And to save 50% off of initial care, you know, I often talk about the incredible response that people get by having that first bone in the neck very gently put back where it belongs, and the subsequent release of interference in the brain stem, especially in the lower end of the medulla where it becomes the spinal cord. And I have debated over and over again about having callers on my health show. And I'm thinking I might do that. I stopped callers at one time because the same people kept calling over and over again, which is a killer for talk radio. And not having a screener, there are always people who like to have fun with noises and other kinds of things when they called in. And if I had a screener, I would take calls on all my shows. But without a screener, you're playing Russian roulette. And as I listen to some of the other shows, some of them are very well managed, some of them aren't so as much. And so a lot of goofy stuff takes place. If you were listening to the replay of Paul's show before I got on, you know what I'm talking about. But I would like for these people that I take care of to call in on my radio show and tell you what happened to them with their first adjustment. The lights turning back on, feeling like they're alive again, the elimination of pain, the ease of movement, the clarity of thought, feeling younger and lighter. It's one thing for me to get on here and talk about this. It's another thing for them to get on here. And I'm really thinking about doing such a thing. Because it's easier to believe them than it is to believe me. Believe me. All right, so that special is still going on, but you have to schedule it. And you would call 801-523-1890. 801-523-1890 to schedule about a 30-minute period of time for us to talk about your symptoms and what's going on and what we can do for you if I think it falls into my scope of practice. If it doesn't, we'll shake hands and we'll still be friends. But if it does, you're scheduled for more than that 30 minutes. You're scheduled for me to take care of you if you decide you want me to take care of you. You don't have to come back a second time. Or you can go to jackstockwell.com. There's a way there that you can schedule an appointment. And then Hannah or Trudy will get back to you and let you know, pin down a better time that fits your schedule as well as ours. I always have a joke that I tell people, because a lot of people who have my phone number or my email will try to contact me outside of the office to get into the office. And I always tell them, hey, there's this wall between me and the ladies. You can't see it, but it's there. And I don't touch the schedule. They don't touch spines. And it just works perfect. I go to work in the morning with a schedule that they put together, not me. All right, now I want to talk about this Obama-appointed judge who says, no, I think we should continue to give all these dyes to children. I want to talk about that for a few minutes, and then I want to get into the flu. And all of those of you who are making comments, it's very sweet of you on the stream. I appreciate that. We're approaching 900 subscribers to this health show. I've already been approached by YouTube to get to a point where I can actually make some money off of it. But 1,000 is the big number. And that's my goal for this year, is to get subscribers up to 1,000. So those of you who listen to my podcast, if you can like and subscribe, the Health Show podcast, I would greatly appreciate your continuing to like and subscribe so we can spread the word. Okay, now, this Judge Irene Berger just blocked West Virginia's ban on artificial food dyes. So as Well, I don't know what's happening to my voice. My herbal tea here. Just as the president, Trump, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. have been pushing to get these dyes out of these dyes that are in our food, are banned in Europe. Why would Europe ban something like that? Because it's crap. Because it's poisonous. Because you don't have the enzymes to break that stuff down. And it affects the brain. And what's the nervous system that is most susceptible to toxic poisoning? The nervous system. What's the next one? There's your trivia question of the morning. Nervous system's number one. Nope, not cardiovascular. Your endocrine system. Your ability to be happy. To be happy and satisfied and content is greatly disaffected by the presence of chemical toxins in the bloodstream because it disrupts your hormonal balance. What happens as a result? Depression, anger, moodiness. Oh, it's just her time of the month. BS. I don't believe that. Now, if it happens every single cycle, just the same 3 or 4 days before her period starts, okay, there might be some hormonal involvement. But I've talked to so many patients now, male and female, that when I hear all of the signs and symptoms, it's not PMS. It's poisoning. Poisoning of the endocrine system. Nervous system first, endocrine system second. What's third? I don't know. I'd have to look at that. All right, so Governor Patrick Morrisey of West Virginia, he says Charleston, which of course is the capital of West Virginia, is weighing legal options to get harmful crap out of our food supply. That's the governor saying that. Imagine Governor Cox talking about that, getting harmful crap out of the food supply of Utahns. So the HS Secretary, Bobby Kennedy Jr., spent the first year of President Trump's second administration trying to implement his MAHA vision, Make America Healthy Again. But it just got a big roadblock during the holiday season when this Obama-appointed judge issued a ruling siding with the conglomerate of dye companies to stifle a landmark ban on artificial food additives. So during his first trip as America's leading healthcare official, Secretary Kennedy spoke in Martinsburg, West Virginia, alongside Governor Patrick Morrisey, who said his state's ban plan and the Democrat Scion's choice to visit the area first shows that the MAHA movement begins right here in West Virginia. I thought that was great when I first heard about that. Now, as of Wednesday, last week, a federal judge in the Mountain State, and I've lived in West Virginia. West Virginia is absolutely one of the greenest states I've ever been in. Just incredibly beautiful. And anytime, I've often used West Virginia in discussing national beauty in private conversations with friends or patients as just a sterling example. And West Virginia, is always made fun of for various reasons. But its pristine beauty just stands out. And now it comes out as the first state in its own legislature's actions to ban artificial dyes in their food. So this federal judge, Irene Berger of the Southern District of West Virginia, blocked those plans and sided with the food dye manufacturers and issued a preliminary injunction halting the West Virginia legislature's ability to enforce the policy that Governor Morrissey championed at Kennedy's event. So Berger issues this 30-page ruling blocking enforcement of House Bill 2354, a law drafted by Delegate Adam Burkhammer, a Republican from Upshur, which bans food and pharmaceuticals that have been adulterated with artificial compounds, including butylated hydroxyxanosol, red 3, red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 1, blue 2, and green 3. Now, the FDA bans red number 3, artificial coloring in beverages and candy and other foods. The FDA already bans it. And knowingly contaminating food with such artificial dyes and compounds would have resulted in a potential misdemeanor charge and a $500 fine, according to the Wheeling News Register. Now, red 3, as I said, is already banned by the FDA, in part due to lab tests done on rats that found development of thyroid issues and cancer, according to the National Institutes of Health and Health and Human Service documents. Now, the case was brought. I mean, who would be the one suing to make sure that they can still put dye in the children's breakfast cereals? Well, the International Association of Color Manufacturers, which is a K Street organization. K Street is well known as lobbyist heaven in Washington, D.C. But it's a K Street organization that alleged the bill causes economic harm to its member companies. The lawsuit is based on money. So what? Big surprise. That is what they are contending. They are alleging that if this bill goes through fully or is enforced, it will cause economic harm to those who are members of the Association of Color Manufacturers. And it lets Charleston usurp Washington's power to regulate food safety. Well, we can't have that. We can't have a state legislature elected by the people of that state to decide what's safe and not safe. We have the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. Food and Drug Administration. We should let the Food and Drug Administration decide what's safety and what isn't. So we can't, and then they use the word usurp. We can't let Charleston usurp Washington's power to regulate food safety, and it interferes with interstate commerce, which of course is a Article 1 provision of the Constitution. Congress will regulate interstate commerce. Not the state legislature of West Virginia. Oh, jeez. So, according to the IACM, International Association of Color Manufacturers, this statute arbitrarily and irrationally targets color additives. No U.S. agency, state or federal, nor any court has ever found to be unsafe. The IACM said that in the suit, adding that the ban also lacks scientific evidence. So, while Judge Berger ruled in their favor, she also rejected the claim that the policy was an unlawful bill of attainder, or which is a law singling out a person or a group. Now, you don't suppose, after this took place, that she might have gotten, and I hate to cast aspersions on her moral character, a healthy campaign donation in the background for being a good little judge and deciding for the IACM. Now, she says that there's no scientific evidence whatsoever. The Center for Science in the Public Interest formally petitioned the U.S. Food and Drug Administration back almost 20 years ago to ban 8 food dyes, including the 2 most common, red 40 and yellow 5. These were already banned when this happened almost 20 years ago. It's already banned in the United Kingdom. And so the Center for Science in the Public Interest asked the FDA to ban the following dyes: yellow 5, red 40, blue 1, blue 2, green 3, orange B, red 3, yellow 6. And while the FDA considers this petition, which of course can take years, the center asked the FDA to require products containing the dyes to carry a warning about their possible effects. We do that with tobacco on cigarettes. They also wanted correct information given to consumers about the dye's effect on some children's behavior. Boy, now that goes right back to how I started this whole conversation with the idea of the developmental processes of a child's nervous system. What governs a child's behavior? What they were told was right or wrong? Well, that's not what they mean. The ability to sit still, the ability to pay attention, the ability to converse and relate, the ability to demonstrate some level of cognizance, that they're learning things. And then they also wanted to test the neurotoxicity of any new food additives and any new colors. Now, red 40 and yellow 5 are the most common dyes that are used in foods in the United States. Now, I know what you're thinking. What foods? Food manufacturers. Why do they use dyes in the first place? Let's back up to that. I didn't expect to spend this much time on the subject, but I feel like I need to. Because even if an Obama-appointed judge tells the food dye manufacturers, don't pay attention to West Virginia law, you go right ahead and keep making that stuff. Why do they use dyes in the first place? Why do they need to dye something? Why does Atlantic salmon need to be sprayed orange? Why do oranges that you can buy in the produce section of the store, why do they have to spray them orange? Why do different kinds of foods get sprayed different kinds of colors? Well, they've been in the warehouse for a while and they start to look a little peaked. You know, if you were 65 years old and you have in your photo album a picture of you in your wedding dress at 22, wouldn't you like to look like that again? If there was some spray we could come up with and spray your body with that to make you look like you're 22 again, wouldn't you like that? Would you give 1 second of concern of the toxicity of that spray dye on your body to make you look 22 for even 1 second? I doubt it. You'd probably take the dye. So, why do they have to dye our foods? They want them to simulate fruit or vegetable colors. When you go down the cereal aisle in the supermarket and you look at some of the most popular breakfast cereals for children, well, adults eat them too. Look at the rainbow colors. And there's certain foods that have every color imaginable. Dyeing what is trying to be passed off as food, which it certainly isn't. Breakfast cereals at least in my book, in my definition, is not fit for human consumption. Once you consider what it goes through to put it in that bag and what you're pouring out into a bowl, hardly is definable as food. However, why do they dye this stuff? Well, they want that Atlantic salmon to look like salmon. It's a farmed animal. And the same with various kinds of fruits and vegetables get sprayed before they end up and display in the produce section. But they do the same thing with foods that are already processed. Kraft's guacamole dip. And you can buy that in the deli section. The green color comes from yellow 5, yellow 6, and blue 1. It does not come from avocados. Aunt Jemima blueberry waffles. The blue color of what they're passing off as blueberries comes from red 40 and blue 2. The blue color of the blueberries does not come from blueberries. General Mills fruit roll-ups. The fruity colors come from yellow 5, yellow 6, red 40, and blue 1. It does not come from raspberries, strawberries, kiwis, or other real fruits. And Betty Crocker's au gratin potatoes. 100% real potatoes. The yellow color comes from yellow 5 and yellow 6. It does not come from potatoes. Now, food manufacturers often use these colors in foods for children, in cereals and snack foods. In cereals, these are the ones that are heavily dyed. Apple Jacks, Fruit Loops, Fruity Cheerios, Lucky Charms, Post's Fruity Pebbles, and Trix. You know these cereals, and you look at them. You look at the cover of the box, and then just all these pretty colors, subliminally trying to reach the back end of the subconscious of that child, or even the parent, that these things represent fruit or vegetables. Now, what two candies jump out in your mind right now as some of the most popular candies of multiple colors? Well, it's not Snickers. It's not Butterfinger. Starburst, Skittles, M&Ms have all of those dyes. So when you eat your M&M peanuts, or just the regular M&M, or who doesn't love Starburst? Who doesn't love a Skittle now and then? All those colors, they're artificial dyes. Usually we don't think about that stuff, but we know that it has known, established neurological interference in the human nervous system. But some of those, we know, will cause cancer in rats. Yeah, but it has to be of such a tremendous amount. Yeah, it was a lot of past normal consumption in the rats. But what, does it have a cumulative effect in the body? I've looked for science and research to back that up. I haven't been able to find it. I don't know. Does it have an accumulative buildup effect in the body? Usually when you bring things into human digestion for which you do not have enzymes to break it down, it has a way of building up in the body, especially the liver. Now, when Great Britain banned artificial dyes, the food manufacturers went out of business. No, of course not. They were forced to do something else. What did they do? Think about it for a second. When the food manufacturers in Great Britain, by parliamentary law, could no longer put artificial colors in their foods, what did they do? Well, they went to natural colors. In fact, the British version of the candies that are listed above that I just told you here in my presentation uses all natural colors. Another difference in the United States, McDonald's colors their strawberry Sunday sauce with red 40. What do you think they color a strawberry shake with strawberry color with a strawberry shake at McDonald's in England? Actually, Britain. Yeah, it is Britain. Strawberries. What a thought. Does it cost more to color a strawberry shake with strawberries instead of red 40? Yeah, it's going to cost a little bit more. So you pass it on to the consumer because the consumer is going to down that shake knowing there's no artificial dyes in there. But it's worth a couple of extra bucks. Well, whatever it is. So where do these dyes come from? Interestingly enough, it comes from the same source as most artificial vitamins. Now think about that for a second. I'm not just going to throw the answer out there. I'm going to bait you a little bit. And yes, I'm going to have time. I will have time to get to the flu. Where do these colors come from? The artificial colors. The same source as the vast preponderance majority of artificial vitamins from coal tar and from petroleum. So by petitioning the FDA, the Center for Science in the Public Interest is trying to get the public to focus on the synthetic use of dyes. And why? Because food manufacturers responded to public pressure in the United Kingdom. Can the same thing happen here? Well, up until now, food dyes have been on the rise because they can get away with it. It's just like the continual expanding vaccine schedule, because you cannot sue a vaccine manufacturer for neurological damage to your child's brain, which allows a volcano of new vaccines all the time to show up, because there's no responsibility for the damage of food dyes. They put it out everywhere they possibly can to take non-foods to look and make them look like foods. So I can go into that a lot further, but I think I've done enough. It's just that this judge has introduced an injunction against this law that would ban the use of food dyes in food in the state of West Virginia. And of course, you gotta nip it in the bud. I mean, you can't let West Virginia get away with this, because other states, enlightened states, might want to make the same decision. Now, what do studies show in comparing the neurological development of children in the United Kingdom since the banning of those artificial dyes with children in America that consume those artificial dyes? Of course, there isn't any. No one's going to pay for that. Of course, there's no research. I just had to say that. All right, so I want to move into something else. I want to mention once again the K-Talk special, K-Talk price. Let me put it that way. The K-Talk price for care in my clinic. That means children are half price too. Why in the world would you bring a child in to have me do what I do to adults? Well, trampolines, soccer, bike wrecks, contact sports before puberty, things that misalign the spine to bring pressure on the brainstem, that can affect them in more dangerous ways even than food dyes. And another thing, the price on all Jack's packs are reduced, whether it's for women's issues, men's issues, for digestion, heart support, specifically for heart support, for the immune system support, prostate support. There's a few others in there where we put a pack together of several different products, significantly reduced price, so that we created Jack's Packs. Of course, I put my name on it. Because people will come in and say, what can we do about the flu? What can we do about, well, my husband's prostate is, the blood work is really, really bad. And what can we do for his prostate? You know, I'm moving into perimenopause and I'm beginning to feel some emotional changes. Is there something I can do? Yeah, we're going to feed your endocrine system. And you need this, and you need this, and you need, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Can't you just give me one thing? We're programmed in the pharmaceutical industry that for certain kinds of problems, usually just one drug's enough. Now, we did a heart sound recorder on somebody yesterday that's on, I think, half a dozen drugs for his heart. And we did a heart sound recorder on him a month ago, and we did another one yesterday that showed significant improvement in that heart because he said, I took those supplements you gave me religiously. Now, somebody might say, well, what about the drugs he's taking? No, no, that wasn't it. How do we know? Because the drugs were there with the first test. The supplements weren't. The supplements were present during the second test. Significant improvement and significant improvement in how he feels. Now, let me get back to the Jack's Packs. We have Jack's Packs on several different products, and they can get a little pricey. So we've reduced the price significantly on every of the Jack's Packs. So if you know somebody that needs some of these things, and these are all food-based, they're not synthetic. They have no food dyes. All right, I want to go on here with the flu. That's what part of this program is titled. It's the flu. And it's interesting how things continue to change in the pharmaceutical world. Medicine has gone from vitamin D therapy as a scam. And vitamins may cause your death. Excuse me. To saying that vitamin D has a major impact on your immune system and a major fighter of inflammation, and what else is medicine saying now? Plays a critical role in the prevention and treatment of asthma, and favorably influences hormone levels via its role as a steroid hormone in the vitamin D endocrine system. It's a potent cancer inhibitor. What else is medicine saying? Plays a major role in cases of chronic sinusitis, sinus infection, chronic rhinosinusitis. That's what medicine is saying now, but it wasn't that long ago that they were saying that vitamin D therapy was a scam. In fact, all vitamins were dangerous outside of food. In fact, vitamins could cause your death. Now, there were some studies that were done on vitamin C out of the University of Southern California. They found that if you took more than 250 milligrams of ascorbic acid per day, it would harden your arteries. Well, ascorbic acid isn't vitamin C. It's just a part of the vitamin C complex. And I have no doubt that that's probably true. And that vitamin A will cause birth defects in a pregnant woman. Well, the vitamin A that they were talking about was synthetic vitamin A, not the real vitamin. and that vitamin E can cause heart disease. Well, the vitamin E that they were talking about is the synthetic tocopherol oils, not the real vitamin E that comes from the bran and the germ that come from the germ of wheat and other grains. But that's another story. Now, when a journal of immunology starts talking like this about vitamin D, and when none of the authors are selling vitamin D or have any financial ties to companies that sell vitamin D, you know something's up. Did you follow me on that? When medical researchers start, as they have a few years ago, but really big now, talking about the great benefits of vitamin D, and they have no monetary involvement or benefit from what they're saying, then, as I said, you know something's up. They've discovered something. And just perhaps, especially since Americans are turning up with surprisingly low levels of vitamin D, we have one more major therapy to help us with our chronic sinusitis and our colds and the flu and bronchitis and asthma and pneumonia. And here are just a few things in my notes here that immunology experts are now saying. That vitamin D directly and favorably affects the cells of your immune system, including the monocytes, the macrophages, the dendritic cells, and the T cells. And all the immune cells that fight infection and disease. Peer-reviewed research is now saying it. And when it comes to your immune system, vitamins A and D take center stage by influencing dozens of immune system reactions and responses to bacteria, viruses, and fungi. And the technical names for just some of the cells and immune functions that vitamin D favorably affects are the T cells, the B cells, the calcitriol, which regulates about 100 genes, the monocytes, interleukin-1, interleukin-17, interferon, CD4 and CD8 cells, plasma cells, and immunoglobulin. Just a few decades ago, vitamin D therapy was a scam. Now the research on vitamin D is showing all of this incredible information. Vitamin D suppresses inflammation in the sinuses as well as your nasal and breathing membranes. It favorably regulates the calcidiol. This is the only antimicrobial agent of its type produced by humans. And with adequate vitamin D, we know it's produced in the skin. It's in your breathing passages. It's throughout your digestive system, all of which are constantly exposed to all the microbes and all the germs and all the pathogens that we drink in, breathe in, eat in. And vitamin D helps to underscore the strength of the mucosal lining of all those tissues. Vitamin D levels are consistently and significantly lower in patients in the intensive care areas of the hospital, especially with those with infections and sepsis. Vitamin D levels are consistently lower in people who suffer from chronic sinus problems, sinusitis, sinus infection, rhinosinusitis, and even nasal polyps. Well, it took years for this information to finally make it to the mainstream medicine. But it's here now and is extremely pertinent to you. And if you have chronic folds, that's a flu and a cold, a fold. He's suffering from a fold. Chronic colds, chronic flu, sinusitis, bronchitis, pneumonia, allergic rhinitis, chronic rhinosinusitis, or other kinds of immune problems, and you've tried everything, there's hope. You may simply need to utilize some protocols that are in our immune pack that I use, and I always step it up during the wintertime because I hear about all these people getting this super flu, and it took us out for a week. It hit our whole family. We were all down for an entire week. I haven't felt anything. I think I remarked to Trudy in the office the other day that one morning here about a week ago, I woke up and sneezed at least 12 times in a 2 or 3 or 4 minute period. And then that was it. Nothing else. But then I take what's in my Jack's pack for the immune support. Now I'm going to get to that here in a second and tell you what that is. Just a question that came in here on the stream. What's your feeling about DMSO? If it comes from a good source, it's good stuff. And DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide, it goes right through the skin. It's going to end up in the bloodstream. And usually you use it to transport other things. You need to be careful with it, but for the most part, it's pretty good stuff. It triggers immune responses. All right. Now, studies are showing that synthetic or high doses of isolated vitamin D can cause problems. And some of these problems relate to calcification in your body. That means that hardening of the arteries can worsen, kidney stones can form, early blockages in your heart can worsen. These problems are rare, but they're real. And this is why you have to get vitamin D from whole food and the sun only. Stay away from store-bought vitamin D. I've told you about the small rodent poison all the time. If you pick up a bottle of store-bought vitamin D and you read the ingredients, it's going to say cholecalciferol on the label. Cholecalciferol. If you look at the package of small rodent poison, the ingredients, cholecalciferol, the same thing. Remember that they used to use warfarin, rat poison, for rats and mice because it would cause hemorrhaging. And these poor little critters would bleed to death internally. And they could bleed to death inside the wall or under the floor or wherever else in the garage and start to stink after a while. And the ASPCA came out and said, this is inhuman treatment for these animals to make them hemorrhage and bleed to death internally. Then, of course, the internal blood started leaking out, and you start seeing blood spots all over the place, either next to the dead or dying animal or where the animal was as it was on its path somewhere else to die. So it got banned. You couldn't use warfarin. Now we use warfarin on humans to thin the blood as a blood thinner. But you can't use it on small rodents. So they started using cholecalciferol, a very synthetic form of vitamin D, because it causes calcification of the kidneys. This was discovered back in the 1940s and 1950s in America when a lot of synthetic vitamin D started showing up in the marketplace, and children started having calcification of their kidneys. And out of nowhere, this started taking place, and as they researched it more and more, they found out it was linked to synthetic vitamin D. Now, the FDA says vitamin D is cholecalciferol. So even if you get vitamin D from a good food source, such as lanolin, in a dry form, not a liquid form, in a dry form, the label is going to say cholecalciferol. So because the FDA says that's what it is. It's just like if you buy a bottle of vitamin C. You read the label, it's going to say ascorbic acid because the FDA says ascorbic acid is vitamin C when it isn't. So you want to find out what else is in that product besides cholecalciferol, you're looking for foods. Then you know it came from food. Well, the problem of calcification of the kidneys, now someone will come along and say, well, turning the kidneys of rats and mice into calcium so that they die of kidney disease, is that any less human to do that to these poor little rodents than giving them warfarin? Yeah, because you don't have blood splattered all over the place. Because when these little rodents would die from internal hemorrhaging, there would be blood on the floor, blood on the kitchen floor, the garage floor, somewhere where this mice was spilling out its blood before it died, this mouse. Now, they can die without leaving a mess. They just die of serious kidney disease, of, what's the word? Hypernatremia, brought on by kidney calcification. I forget what it is. And so this stuff comes in a lot of different forms. And we now know that vitamin D comes in, it's not just vitamin D2 or D3. There are dozens or perhaps many other forms, even various colors of vitamin D in nature, but you need to get the real thing. And so the synthetic or high doses of isolated vitamin D is what's causing the calcification problem. Now, the best form, this is what you're waiting for. The best form of whole, natural vitamin D, other than long periods of time in the sun where your body will make vitamin D in your skin, as far as food source is concerned, is real cod liver oil. There was a time in the history of our country in the last century, in the early part of the century, especially prior to and during World War II, where if you were a child during that period of time, and you're still alive to hear me, which I doubt, you would get a teaspoon of cod liver oil before you left your house in the morning to go to school. And when you got to school, there was a little pill sitting on your desk that the teacher put there before you got there, which was an iodine pill to prevent goiter and to stimulate better brain development. The ability of your brain to function correctly during the developmental stages of life is iodine dependent. Okay, the evidence for what I just said is overwhelming. I'll go into that some other time. But unfortunately, when we get to the cod liver oil, most of them are industrially produced from the livers of inferior fish. And the oil is heavily treated, most brands removing the natural vitamin A and D because they'll spoil, and adding synthetic A and D. And fortunately, there is one last cod liver oil made from the livers of healthy fish from the pristine deep ocean waters. And the livers are not treated in any way. They're simply fermented to some degree. And that's what we have with tuna omega-3 and also with standard processes cod liver oil. The northern Baltic Sea, obtained by the Norwegian fishermen. Now, the type of cod liver oil, this type contains thousands of molecular structures. And we have clues on how approximately about 24 of those structures work. The remaining thousands of molecules and nutritional structures, well, we simply don't understand everything because there isn't a whole lot of money to research that stuff. Because research is expensive. But in many cases, they haven't been fully identified. But there's one thing we do know about real cod liver oil. It contains the counterbalancing nutrients to vitamin D that renders it totally healthful and safe, which you will not find in synthetic vitamin D. Now, the vitamins A and F are just a couple of these nutrients that come along with cod liver oil, as the vitamin D in cod liver oil naturally drives calcium into your bones. This is the calcification I'm talking about, proper calcification. Vitamin A and F, the omega-3 unsaturated fatty acids, maintain calcium in the soft tissues and the muscles, providing the natural antidote to calcification. And this is what will happen with these overdosing people who go get their labs, and the labs show your calcium around 20. Should be, I think, 50 or higher. And a calcium around 20. And your doctor, who has not studied vitamin D, but has read the latest, advertisers, will tell you you need to start doing 50,000 units of vitamin D a day. I don't know a quicker way to get muscle cramps and Charlie horses than that. I don't know a quicker way to have restless leg syndrome than that. I don't know a quicker way to have the inability to stay out in the sun during the summertime. All these things are calcium dependent. Calcium is vitamin D dependent. Your body will not absorb calcium in your diet into the gut without the presence of vitamin D. In fact, that's vitamin D's first and foremost job, is to facilitate the absorbent part of vitamin D into the gut, or calcium. Calcium will go right on through you unless there's adequate vitamin D levels in the bloodstream. Too much vitamin D, you get sunstroke. That's why you see sunstroke in the summertime. You don't see it in the wintertime. In the summertime, some people are out there in the sun so much, with so much of their skin exposed to the sun, that they're turning into a vitamin D factory right there, minute to minute, breath to breath. The higher the vitamin D, the greater the concentration of calcium in the bloodstream. It comes out of the tissues, just as it will come out of the gut wall into the bloodstream. In normal digestive practice, elevated levels of vitamin D will pull calcium out of your tissues back into the bloodstream. Your body's cooling mechanism, your refrigeration system, your ability to sweat is calcium dependent. You can get a stroke from this in the nervous system, because your ability to cool off is calcium dependent. You can have a heart attack from high levels of vitamin D, because the heart muscle's ability to regulate itself as far as the strength of contraction is concerned is calcium dependent. That's why we have calcium blockers used in cardiology in order to slow down or lessen the pounding of the heart. Calcium is the only mineral in the human body that has a gland to regulate its level. The parathyroid glands that are on the outer edges, 4 of them, on the outer edges of your thyroid gland. They regulate the level of calcium in the bloodstream. And if you don't have enough calcium, they're going to steal it from the bones. Then you're going to end up with osteopenia or worse. This is usually people who shun the sun. This is usually with people who will not go out in the sun unless they're slathered with sunblock. The sun does not cause cancer. Your diet is what has weakened the health of the skin that will be triggered by ultraviolet radiation to cause abnormal gene expression. Now, you can blame that on the sun, but your skin has to be in a situation first before the sun will do that, because for every person who has skin cancer from the sun, there's 1,000 out there in the sun who don't have skin cancer. More than half the population of this planet is in the sun every day. with very, very few cases of skin cancer. Now, vitamin D has to be properly metabolized in the system. There are those who want to stop calling vitamin D a vitamin and start calling it a hormone because its activity is hormone based and it's a steroid structure. None of the other vitamins have a steroid structure to it. You know, when they first discovered vitamin D, they thought it was part of the vitamin B family. Its first designation was as one of the vitamin Bs. And then as they studied it more and more, they realized, man, this is nothing like vitamin B. This is something altogether different. And it was before vitamin E was discovered, but after vitamin C was discovered, so it got the designation of vitamin D. Vitamins were listed with the letters chronologically as they were discovered. Now, the basic nutritional premise is the cornerstone of effective, safe nutritional therapy. Your body uses nutrients when they're consumed in their whole, raw, natural state. I changed my diet at the beginning of December, and I've lost about 15 pounds just by eating whole, raw, natural foods. If Mother Nature didn't make it, I don't eat it. And it's amazing, with just the loss of 15 pounds and getting rid of flour-based products, because Mother Nature didn't make flour. Now, Jack, you're stretching it. No, Mother Nature didn't make white bleached flour. Let me put it that way. Mother Nature made grains. Man grinds them into flour. You can say that flour is a Mother Nature product. As long as it's from a whole grain in its heritage form, in the sense that it has the genetic structures of the grains of our great-great-great-grandparents, and not the genetically modified stuff. So that's out of my diet. Sugar, candies, cakes, pastries is out of my diet. What I've been eating for breakfast is Greek yogurt with fruit, especially high fiber fruit like blueberries and berries in general. For lunch is usually a small portion, but mostly protein. And same thing for dinner. And I'm telling you, I feel amazing with just having lost 15 pounds. But part of my morning supplement dosage that I take, and I take a lot of supplements in the morning, is cod liver oil. Three of the capsules. Now, there are various cod liver oils out there. You need to be very careful which ones you get, because some of them are overly processed. And if you get something other than what I recommend, standard process is cod liver oil, make sure it was refrigerated. Health food stores will have that. Grocery stores have it. Barleans and some of these others, and Udos, some of these other oils, they're probably pretty good. I don't like the texture of oil in my mouth, so I take it in capsules. Now, when you consume it this way, when you consume what Mother Nature made in the way of vitamins, it's usually 100 times more effective than synthetics, and rendered far safer, of course. Now, you need vitamin D to build strong bones. You need vitamin D to modulate your hormones. You need it to strengthen your immune system. You need it to normalize your sinus and breathing passages, and to reduce joint pain, and more than that. Now, the normal dose that I recommend for the cod liver oil that we have in the office, that's a part of our immune pack, is about 2 to 6 capsules a day, depending on what kind of health condition you're in. Two, if you're maintaining health. What about Carlson's brand cod liver oil? I have no problem with Carlson's. You just asked. I have no problem with that. Like I said, I like standard process because I know where it came from. But Carlson's is a good oil, no doubt about it. And so the normal dose is anywhere from 2 to 6 capsules a day. When your body is under stress, as with colds or flu, your vitamin D definitely needs a jump. And if you tried to take a higher dose of vitamin D from the store, you can risk some problems. But the cod liver oil that you can get extra D during periods of colds, flu, and stress without the worry. So what I do is if you are having a serious upper respiratory problem or a serious sinus problem or the flu that you can't get out of bed except to try to make it to the toilet, about 6 capsules of cod liver oil, plus anywhere from 2 to 6 tablets of Cataplex D, which is standard process is vitamin D in a pill that comes from lanolin. You ever wonder why some animals laying out in the sun lick their fur? Not just cats. Dogs will do it, sheep do it, horses do it, cows do it. Because the lanolin that their bodies make that leaks out into the coat to keep the hair of their body healthy and resilient to bacteria that lands on is loaded with vitamin D. And that's how they get their vitamin D. Now, I've recommended that at the first sign of any kind of sinus problems or flu or bronchitis, you begin to use maybe herbal throat spray might help. But in addition to using cod liver oil, when it comes to the flu or bronchitis or some kind of upper respiratory problem, a bad cold, head cold, chest cold, whatever, is something called Conjuplex. You're going to take 2 every hour or 2. And Imuplex. You take a couple of them 3 times a day until the cold or the flu is resolved. And then, of course, I recommend 2 to 6 capsules of cod liver oil to go along with it. Now, given all that's very powerful therapy, which I just told you. Conjuplex is just, my goodness, it's almost like a miracle in and of itself. It's just fantastic stuff. And it has several different products inside of it, not the least of which is calcium lactate and RNA and Thymex and some other stuff. But it is a tremendous boost for the immune response. Now, we have Conjuplex in a chewable form, each pill flavored with fruit juice. I think it's cherry. I think it's a drop of cherry juice to make it palatable for children to chew up. And so I have patients now who their kids going to school this morning, and it's already almost 9 o'clock. So they've already left for school, chewed up about 3 tablets of chewable Conjuplex to improve the immune response for upper respiratory problems. I have heard back from these parents for well over a decade now how their kids can get through the entire school year without getting sick. There are those who use my 636 formula. 6 calcium lactates, was it 3 Cataplex F and 6 Cataplex C? I think that's what it is, who don't get sick anymore. I can't remember the last time I was sick. Literally, I can't remember. I don't miss any time in the office for being sick. I remember a time, I think it was around 3 years ago, when I was working on somebody who when I was working on him, I just felt invaded, only to find out 2 or 3 weeks later that person had just the day before got a COVID-19 vaccine, and they were still in the shedding process. And I remember just feeling like hell the rest of that day. I had my daughter make an emergency run to the clinic and adjust my spine. And within 20 to 30 minutes, after suffering for a while, I felt immediate improvement. But that's the only time, I'm telling you, in years I can remember being sick, because I take the stuff I tell my patients to take every morning, including cod liver oil. One of these, I've always thought that one of these days I would come in here and present a list of what I take in the morning. But frankly, I think that might be overdoing it. I don't know that that's necessary, because there are those who say I overdo it. Maybe I do, but I certainly don't get sick, or haven't been sick for some time. All right, you know what? I think that's going to do it. I know this show is supposed to go till the top of the hour, which is only a few minutes away, but I've got an emergency I need to take care of. And I just wanted to thank you all for this wonderful opportunity to be a part of the lineup at K-Talk Radio. I don't take that for granted. I don't take it lightly. And I sincerely appreciate the faith and trust that's given to me to try to bring to you a show that's worthy of your attention. Now at ForbiddenDoctor.com, under education, there are hundreds of podcasts, literally hundreds of podcasts on that many different subjects. And then I've got this K-Talk special still going in the clinic for my initial care at half off the normal price. It has to be scheduled, because your first visit is anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. Follow-up visits are very, very brief. But the initial care takes time because x-rays are involved. And x-rays will tell me what I need to do to fix the problem, because what I'm trying to fix, you can't feel it. It's too, as I tell my patients, it's too deep in the meat. It's down to the very surface of bones. And because you really can't feel bones in the neck, by feeling the neck, all you feel are muscles, ligaments, tendons. You can't really feel the bone itself. They're just covered with too many support tissues. It takes an x-ray to see adequately what's really going on. So the initial care takes a little while. Once I know how you're misaligned and what's required to put it back into alignment, as provable on a post x-ray, then I know what I need to do to take care of you thereafter. But you would need to call 801-523-1890 to schedule it. There are some spaces left in the next couple of weeks where I can take care of a new patient. But I think that's going to take care of it. I'm going to close the program down, and I'm going to kick on a program at K-Talk to pick up where Paul left off there before I got on the air. And then I will be back again next Monday with my viewpoint as to what's going on around the world. I know it ticks off a few people because I'm not 100% MAGA anymore. And I got my reasons. Although there are several things the president has done that I'm very much in favor of and very grateful that he's done them. There's just some promises he made in his initial campaign he hasn't kept, and he needs to keep them. All right, so to those of you on the stream, I appreciate your presence. Please like and subscribe. so that this and share it. You send it to somebody you think needs to hear this stuff. And I'm going to say goodbye to you on stream.